chapter 3, verses 9 through 20. There, Paul will and does, and he will do this often, repeat himself. Paul repeats himself. Why does Paul repeat himself? Why, as we go through Romans, does he say the same thing over in different ways? How many teachers do we have here this morning? One over here. Any other professional teachers? One thing they will teach you in class is for your students to learn something, what do you have to do? You have to tell them once, and then tell them what you told them, and then once again remind them of what you told them. And to many of us hard-headed humans, even that is what? That's a challenge. Paul knew all this because he once was a hard-headed Pharisee. And he knew if he's going to speak to his people, of which he was a member, he knew he had to share with them the things that he shares in Romans. And so the book of Romans goes way beyond even the congregation of Rome that existed. And this book, as we noted in our very first study, in the book of Romans has changed people's lives. It has changed a whole group of people. It has changed many people down through the centuries. And we gave you an example of John Wesley, Martin Luther, and we could keep on going all the way down through history. So back to the question again, why does Paul repeat himself? Well, one of the reasons he repeats himself, and he will today and will again next week as we continue the study, is that he knows how hard it is to accept verse 10 of chapter 3. Because what does it say? There is none righteous, what? Not even one. Now that is hard to accept. That is very hard to accept, especially in our culture. Paul, once again, we have to remember, Paul is telling us this from God's point of view, not man's point of view. And folks, there is a big difference between those 2 points of view. The reason it's hard for us to accept verse 10, because we usually, 99% of the time, look at everything that has anything to do with spiritual, religious salvation through man's viewpoint. We look at it through man's ideas, we look at it through man's eyes, and Paul had done that. He had been there, and how successful was that for him? He ended up persecuting the very God he thought he was worshiping. And so, remember, as we look at these verses now, this is Paul telling us this is how God looks at you and I. Which is different than the way man looks at you and I. When we assess through our eyes, when we assess the human condition from our perspective, we will always conclude that at least some people are good. Well, there has to be some good people around, right? Yeah. Well, yeah. But look at this group here today. And humanly, as I look at you, I said, man, there's lots of good people here today. And through the human eyes, we assess that and say, no, I know some real good people. You know, I know some people that don't even go to church, and they're better than many of the people coming to church. Ever heard that one? Have you ever said that yourself? I know someone that doesn't claim to be a Christian, but they have more Christian practices in their life than many Christians that I know. And so humanly speaking, we look at human condition, we say there's at least some good people around. Whose eyes are we looking through? Ours. As Will Rogers once said, I always like to hear a man talk about himself, because then I never hear anything but good. Our problem at this point is that we think of the good we do or can do, our righteousness, as being the same thing as God's righteousness, when it is actually quite different. God's goodness and our goodness are two different animals. And we think they're one and the same, because we're looking through our eyes. Today we're going to look through God's eyes, as Paul explains to us in chapter 3 of Romans, how God sees us. And hold on, put your seatbelts on, because you're not going to like what you hear.